over it. The water was blue, and a fluorescent, unutterable blue, and it was crystal clear without so much as a spark of dust. On the surface, the tank was square, and about 3 meters deep. At the bottom was a row of metal containers, each one stamped with a series of numbers. Half of them were empty, half contained twisted bars of metal packed tightly together. Richard knew what he was looking at this was where the radioactive waste from the reactor was stored to cool it. It wasn't water in the pool, but acid. The box beneath the surface contained the deadliest substance in the world. With a silver, he stepped back. Matt was waiting for him, his face set with a strange determination. It was hard to tell if he was asleep or awake. "Okay, I'm coming," Richard said. The blow took Richard completely unaware, crashing into the back of his head. If he hadn't been moving forward, it might have been broken his neck. He fell to his knees. A woman brushed past him and stepped onto the middle of the gentle fencing mat. It was Miss Deverell. Richard tried to get it to his feet, but he was barely unconscious. All the strength had drained away from him. He could only kneel there, helpless, as Miss Deverell walked towards Matt. An iron bar collapsed in her hands. "He didn't listen to me." She slapped her face with distorted by fury. Her eyes lived, her mouth, and a human grimace. "We should have locked you up, starved you, kept you weak, but it's over now. It's over now. It's the power's gone. You don't know how to control it. Now I can kill you and take you back." She raised the iron bar. Matt looked around him. He had nowhere to run. On one side there was a wall, on the other a low railing to stop him falling into the tank of acid. The gentry was only 2 meters across. Miss Deverell was standing between him and Richard. Even if he could have run away, it would mean leaving his friend at her mercy, and he couldn't do that. He had no choice. He would have to fight. She swung the bar through the air as quickly as her partner. Matt leapt aside, then launched back as Miss Deverell first the pointed end at his stomach. She was moving incredibly quickly for a woman of her age, but her furry had lent her strength. Matt fell against the railings as she threw herself at him. There was nothing he could do. She was taller than him. She was armed, and she was quite mad. Grunting with anger and extenuation, she pressed the bar against his chest, pinning him against the side with such force that Matt thought she would crack his ribs. He wished he couldn't use his powers against her, but she had been all right about that too. The power was no longer there. He had exhausted himself getting this far. There was a faulty switch inside him, and now it had turned itself off. He was an ordinary boy again, and she was beating him. Miss Deverell lifted the bar so that it slid over his chest and under his throat. Now she was using it to crush his windpipe. Her pinched face with its jagged cheekbone was very close. Her eyes was burning with hatred and indignation. Matt felt the floor slipped away beneath his feet. He was being forced over backwards. The railings pressed into his spine and his neck bent back until he could see the pool behind him. Upside down with a gasp, he brought his knee up, crashing it into the woman's stomach. Miss Deverill searched and stepped back. Matt twisted to one side. The bar slammed down again. Matt ducked. A rush of air swept past his cheek as the bar smashed into the railing. Sparks flew up. Then he looked behind her, trying to take her by surprise. But she had been expecting the move. She laced out with one foot, tripping him up. Then he was on his back, starting up as Miss Deverill raised the bar with both hands. She was going to use it like a spear, crossing it down into his chest. "You're still mine," she gasped. "I'll have your blood. I'll tear out your heart and take it back with me." Her fingers tightened. She took a breath, and when she pitched forward, crying out, the iron bar missed Matt, looked past her and saw that Richard had recovered enough to make one last effect with all his strength. He had pushed her from behind. Jane Deverill had lost her balance for a moment. She trotted, then with a sharp she fell over the railings and toppled into the tank. She sank like a stone, plummeting into one of the crates with bubbles erupting from her mouth. She tried to reach the surface, but it was already too late. The acid was eating into her. Richard peered down Richard peered down and saw that already much of her face had gone. "Don't look, Matt," he warned. Miss Deverill was no longer resignable. Her flesh was peeling away, and her hair had come out. Richard closed his eyes. Witches had been burned in the Middle Ages. He knew, but it could never have been as ghastly as it is. Matt stumbled to his feet. "This way," he said. Quietly there was a door at the end of a gentry and another flight of steps going ever further down. The walls were suddenly different. Instead of the paint and smooth plaster of the upper corridors, those walls were cut out of solid rock and were covered with patches of damp moss. The iron steps were rusty, disgrading into darkness. Richard could hear the sound of rushing water, the underground river. The steps ended at a small triangular platform. Just below them, the Black River swept through miles of underground caverns. Beneath the woods, the cave system was like an underground pipe, filled almost to the roof with freezing water. There were no banks or tower path to walk on. There was no other way out. "Hold on to me," Richard said. Matt hooked his arms around the journalist. "Just hold on." They jumped. The reactor chamber of Omega-1 was breaking up. The flames had burst through almost everywhere. The heat was so intense that the heavy pipes and platforms were melting. The ground was buckling and breaking. A crack had appeared in one of the walls, and the night air was feeding the flames, fanning the smoke. Sir Michael Nash stood alone beside the altar, the wind and smoke curling around him. The villagers, mad with fear, had attempt to flee, but outside the protection of the magic circle, they had been instantly swallowed up by the inferno. Now the observation box exploded, shades of glass, and metal splinters cascading into the chamber. A rain of death. The metal tower at the far end of the ring waved as a new spasm seized the floor with a sinking surge and an eruption of sparks. It kneeled over, tearing through a wall. Another window burst, a fireball shooting through it like a bullet from a gun. Sir Michael leapt against the sacrificial slab beneath him. Underneath the smoke and fire, the black hand of the creature that he had summoned one last time against the gate. The ancient stones had almost gone. They were crumbling away, dust pouring out of the gazers that had formed in them. Omega One was in the gap of an earthquake of its making, the walls vibrating, the metal ladders and platforms shaking loose and crashing down. Then, with one last cry, a cry such as the world had not heard for a million years, the creature king of the old ones broke loose. The gate shattered, and a single drop of Matt's blood. Subscribe, it well, share, like, thank you, watch my other videos. I've got the second book to this, thank you. Click main screen, thank you.